I think we definitely are seeing AI be employed more effectively for decision support. So, for example, AI is used in the Palantir Maven Smart system to help users identify what a target is and then build a plan to attack that target. And then they'll also help commanders identify or make a decision regarding which targets are the right ones to hit initially and then what order to hit them in. So building out plans. So AI has been very helpful in that. And I think the challenge will become being able to keep people thoughtfully in the loop of those decisions, because if you get into a really complex operation, so maybe against Chinese forces, where there's a lot of actions happening simultaneously, there's a lot of moves and counter moves happening simultaneously, it'll be too hard for a human to second check the
That's right.
AI. Whereas today with the war in Ukraine, or not the war in Ukraine and the war in Iran, there's the number of actions happening simultaneously and the back and forth happening with the adversary is still manageable for a human. So a human can look at what the AI proposes and understand it and second check it. But at a certain point, these operations become so complex that they aren't able to be evaluated by a human. I think the most important concept or idea that we're seeing right now is the importance of adaptation. The war in Ukraine has highlighted how if you can be a more adaptable force, you can actually overcome one that has a numerical advantage. The Ukrainians were at a severe numerical disadvantage early in that war, and they were able to adapt and create new systems, create dilemmas for the Russians, and the Russians eventually were stopped and then pushed back. And now you have essentially a stalemate in Ukraine where both sides are adapting very quickly, both their drones and their communications and their sensors and their operational concepts. So that adaptation is becoming the central competition in warfare. In a lot of ways, that's also because technology has been proliferated. Every military has access to about the same types of technology. You can see like the Houthis were able to stress and even defeat, in some cases, U.S. missile defenses because they were able to use the same technologies that the U.S. has been using for precision warfare. The Ukrainians and Russians have access to the same basic technologies you've seen in the current war in Iran. The Iranians have been using the same communication networks and satellite sensing and precision weapons technology that the U.S. has been using. So that the playing field technologically is leveled, and now we're in a situation where the important thing is how quickly you can create new combinations of technology and new tactics to be able to stay one step ahead of your opponent. And that means you need to invest in the organizations and the people and the infrastructure to support adaptation primarily. And that's actually more important than building up a stockpile of more weapons, because you build up a stockpile of weapons, you might find, like the Ukrainians, that they're obsolete once the war starts because the enemy comes up with a countermeasure. So that adaptation competition we see is now the kind of the central one in warfare. So I think there's two dimensions to it. One is being able to have a set of companies that are looking at alternative ways of tackling an operational problem. So having independent actors, people outside the defense establishment, who are looking at how Korean military can address some of the operational problems it faces. That helps to bring in other ideas, other ways of approaching the problem, some other technologies that maybe are commercial and not really thought of as being traditional defense technologies. So having those independent actors is important. The other part of it is creating this digital infrastructure. The leaders or commanders can look at operational problems they're likely to be faced with, evaluate different combinations of systems or tactics or operational concepts they can use to address them, and evaluate them in a virtual environment. So essentially, like having a video game version of the war in a way, to be able to evaluate different ways of approaching it. That kind of digital infrastructure would be used to then help you to figure out what to build and what to field. But if we don't have that infrastructure, you end up basically falling into sort of the way we've done it before and the habits of the past, or our doctrine, and we fail to come up with new innovative approaches. So it's really about having those independent actors and then having that infrastructure for adaptation and innovation. Yeah, so South Korea obviously has a robust industrial base and is contributing right now to the war in Ukraine. It's supporting European militaries with ground combat systems, and obviously it's got a microelectronics industry. I think the opportunity for Korea, beyond the fact that it has a robust industrial base already, is to leverage commercial technology for defense purposes. I think what we're finding is because of this proliferation of technology, the information technologies that we now use routinely in our private lives or our commercial lives are militarily relevant. So you can see in Ukraine how hobby drones, Starlink, commercial satellite surveillance systems are all being employed to create kill chains that they're now using to attack the Russian forces. The Iranians, they built the Shahed drone out of commercial parts. So commercial technologies are now militarily relevant, and I think South Korea has this massive commercial electronics industry and then commercial manufacturing industry. Leveraging that will be really important. So, for example, if Korea gets into a protracted conflict with North Korea, it will run through its stockpiles of weapons very quickly. It will have to then turn to commercial industry, like in the auto industry or the shipbuilding industry, to build that next generation of equipment that it will need to continue the fight. Those industries need to be prepared to transition to support military systems. But it also means you need to be adaptable. And the Korean military needs to think about how it's going to adapt and take advantage of these commercial technologies that are available, and start thinking about how they would use them now instead of how they would just use them when the war happens. Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for asking me to do this.